Drop some love in the comment thread.
I welcome myself. Well, I'm so pleased that you made the decision to join us here at church, at Beyond Church Online tonight for our Beyond Church Online instalment of Vision Weekend for our new vision coming up for 2021. And after a year like 2020, when it seems like everything has changed, I first of all want to point to the things which haven't changed. And I want to remind you, as God's messenger to you in your lounge room, in the place where you're reaching us from tonight, that there are some things which actually supersede the natural circumstances around us. And so while the thoughts in your mind, your anxious thoughts maybe it's the media, maybe it's the constant scroll of negativity that you've been reading, is suggesting to you that everything is unstable or uncertain, then I want to remind you that there are some things which don't change. Some things are eternal. And God is one of those things who does not change. And there are some things here at Beyond Church which will not change next year. And although we're here to cast fresh, bold new vision for a new year, we want to remind you, first of all, that there are several things which will not change. The first of those is our Beyond Church overarching vision. It's 6 words. It hasn't changed. We will continue to grow churches, raise leaders, and inspire communities. It's the thing that holds us on course here at Beyond Church. No matter which location you're a part of, it's the thing that doesn't change. It's the thing that helps us say our yeses and our nos. So that's not changing. Another thing which isn't changing is our 9 missional statements. We have 9 statements which we share with our Beyond Church family here at Beyond Church. And if you've ever done our Beyond Basics course, you would be familiar with these. And if you've never done that before and you're interested in learning more about our church and how you can get involved, how you can start to make a practical contribution, then I'd encourage you, when Luke talks later on about next steps, to fill out that form so that we can get you connected with Beyond Basics. So here are our 9 missional statements, which also are not changing in 2021. First of all, and this always comes first, we will continue to point people to Jesus as the one and only hope for humanity. It's the reason why we exist. It's the reason why we make all this effort to meet you here for church in this online format, because we want to share the good news about Jesus, and we want to point to the greatness of who he is and the story about him and the story he's got to tell about you and your future first of all. We will be famous for our generous hospitality, and my hope, my heart, is that you feel warmly welcomed into our church virtual room tonight, wherever you're meeting us from. We will continue to be controversially inclusive. We work really hard to make room for people who are difficult to include. We will always be growing, and it's a difficult challenge to live up to, but we will actually continue to turn things upside down to make sure that we continue to grow. We will develop leaders with influence in every sphere of life. We want you to know that there's room for you and your big dream, your big goal, and your partnership with Beyond Church. We will be a church that creates, innovates, and pioneers, and boy, oh boy, have we been held to that statement this year in 2020. We will make room for miracles. This is one of my favorites, because we will continue to cast big, bold, audacious vision, which will seem ridiculous to the people who hear it, who don't yet know Jesus. But those of you who do know Jesus know that we have access to the element of the supernatural. So we always cast vision. In fact, it's a cultural imperative here at Beyond Church that we always cast vision which is too big for us to physically be able to meet in our own strength. It forces us to make room for miracles. We will be a church planting church, and we have in fact become a church planting church here in 2020. So give yourselves a big clapping hands emoji in the comment thread for that one. And we will continue to flourish from generation to generation. You know, Luke and I, who are the senior pastors here at Beyond Church, have been part of this church for me over 20 years, for Luke since he was a kid. And we've seen the church rise and fall on the leadership of a person or a couple. We've observed it in other churches where, you know, church is sometimes built on a personality, on the charisma of a person. And when we came into our role at this church, we were like, nope, it ends with us. Enough is enough. We're going to build a church that will continue to flourish from generation to generation. Doesn't matter who the leader is, doesn't matter who the team of leaders are. We build teams here at Beyond Church, and so we will continue to flourish from generation to generation. So our overarching vision's not changing. Our 9 missional statements which hold us on course aren't changing. And the third thing I want to point to which isn't changing in 2021 is our Beyond Church culture code. Here at Beyond Church, we've made it really easy for people to belong. Really easy for people to know whether they're carrying our culture. And we say here that we are life bringers. And life is an acronym. It stands for love, inspiration, fun, and excellence. And you'll be seeing that with our team members who are commenting in the comment threads right now, both on Facebook and YouTube. They'll be full of loving comments, welcoming you warmly into the room where you're joining us. They'll be inspirational. They'll be pointing you to what's next, pointing you to something bigger than maybe what you can see right in front of you right now. They are full of fun. They're picking out the best emojis to put in the comment thread so that we have a whole bunch of fun while we're here enjoying church together, and they bring excellence. They drop those links just at the exact right time because we are life bringers and our culture code isn't changing in 2021. So then, where to from here? Well, I just want to quickly, and this is why this was a great service for you to invite friends to, and there's still time. If you haven't invited a friend yet, this is a great time for you to invite them because I'm going to give you a little bit of history now. And God has been building a beautiful story in the life of our church over the past 7 years. We have actually seen, leading into 2020, 7 years of year-on-year growth here at Beyond Church. And that's pretty exceptional in church world. We set big, bold vision every year, and by the grace of God and all glory to Him and Him alone, we have been able to meet those targets and sometimes even grow, exceeding our targets in those 7 years. When I'm talking about growth, I'm talking about numbers of people in our rooms, numbers of people that we're connecting with, the growth that we can actually see and measure in people as they grow in their levels of leadership and their connectedness to the things of God, which we measure, and also the growth in our budget. 7 years of year-on-year growth. It's a miracle. We've lent into themes. I don't know if you've been a part of our church for a while, you might be able to remember some of these. We had a theme a few years ago called Growing Up, which was all about developing our spiritual maturity. We had a theme a few years ago about making room, and our Cessnock location, which is our first location of Beyond Church, that year took a big, bold step of moving into the building next door and enlarging the place of our tent so that we could reach more people, so that we became more visible in the city of Cessnock, and we made room for more, made room for growth, and God brought the increase. Last year, 2019, our theme was Kingdom First. And we spent an entire year focusing on the principles of the book of Matthew chapter 6, which talks about putting the things of God and His kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, which we've talked about a lot this year as well. When you put those things first in your life, then everything else that's going on in the periphery begins to fall into place. And that's what we lent on last year. And then, leading into 2020, we declared finding favour over our year. Wow! In hindsight, what a thing to declare over 2020. Finding favour. We centred our year in this theme verse from Psalm 72 verse 6, which says, "Your favour will fall like rain on our surrendered lives, like showers reviving the earth." And you know, we were praying for physical rain. I don't know if you can cast your mind back, but at the beginning of this year, particularly in the Hunter Valley of New South Wales, there was a drought and we were praying for rain. And in February, we began to see the rain fall. In fact, in our Scone location, our new location leaders up there in the Scone, in the location we had just planted at the beginning of the year, went to a combined churches prayer meeting to pray for rain, and the rain began to fall. There was this immense deluge where the rain was falling so heavily that the Anglican church that they were meeting in, there was water actually running down the insides of the walls of this beautiful old stone building. Wow, finding favour. And then what? March. A global pandemic brought the earth to its knees. But we continued to stand firm and steadfast on the promise and the prophecy we had spoken over our year. And I'm here to tell you that the people in our church and our church as an organisation has continued to find ridiculous, unmerited favour throughout 2020. God has been very good and kind and generous to us. So what's next? Well, we always want to be the church that's answering the questions people are actually asking.
When will I?
How do I?
How will my finances recover?
When will I find a new job?
What should I do? What will I do next?
How do I keep my family moving towards our goals?
After a year like 2020, how do we face a new year following so much change and uncertainty? How do we pick up the pieces and continue to move ourselves, our families, our communities, our businesses, our health and well-being and our financial future forward? How do we in 2021? We build.
That's right. People are asking these kinds of questions. How will I continue to care for my family and provide for my family after I lost my job during COVID? How do I continue to care for my mental health and well-being after a completely disruptive year? How can I even plan for my future when there's so much uncertainty? How do I face 2021 at all? Well, our answer to those questions, and you, if you're partnering your life with the vision of Beyond Church, our answer to those questions will continue to build on the story God has been telling through our church over the past 7 years. How do we 2021? We build. We continue to do what we've always done. We continue to do what seems completely illogical and irrational to those who don't yet know Jesus. We build. We're going to centre our year in this theme verse. It's from 1 Chronicles 28 verse 10, and it says this: God has chosen you to build his holy house. Be brave, determined, and do it. Now let me give you a little bit of context for those verses. What I love about this verse is that it's actually part of the end of King David's story. And if you've been on the Beyond Church page for a few weeks already, you would know that we rounded out our year of finding favour on this final series called Favour Follows the Fight. And we centred that message series on the life of King David in the Bible. And at this point in King David's story, he's actually near the end of his mission. He's become king. He defeated Goliath before he was king. He's been through some battles, some ups and downs. He's become king. He's defeated all the kingdoms he was called to defeat. And now God is calling the next generation to begin to build a temple which will show the community, show all the people, everyone, everywhere, that this God is the one true God. And he says to David, guess what, David? This actually isn't going to be your task. I'm handing this one on to the next generation. Your job was to be the warrior king and defeat those enemy kingdoms. But your son's job, the next generation's inheritance, is going to be to build the house of God. Let me read you a couple of verses leading into our theme verse for this year. It says, so now, this is David speaking to his son Solomon. So now, with God as our witness, and in the sight of all Israel, the Lord's assembly, I give you this charge. Be careful to obey all the commands of the Lord your God, so that you may continue to possess this good land and leave it to your children as an inheritance. As somebody who's been a part of the good land, the good soil that has been Beyond Church over the past 7 years, I want to continue to dwell in that place. But more than that, I want to offer it and keep building on it to offer as an inheritance to my children, to the next generation. He continues, and Solomon, my son, learn to know the God of your ancestors intimately. Worship and serve him with your whole heart and a willing mind. For the Lord sees every heart and knows every plan and thought. If you seek him, you will find him. And that's my message to you tonight. If you don't yet know Jesus, if you seek him, you will find him. So take this seriously. The Lord has chosen you to build a temple as his sanctuary. Be strong and do the work. And I just know there's no better encouragement to the people in our lives, our friends, our neighbours, our family members, our friends who are in Victoria who've been locked down for most of the year, our friends overseas who are still battling second and third waves of COVID. There's no better message for us to be bringing to our circle of influence than we can do this. We can actually defeat all odds and continue to build what God has called us to build. When we start to build God's house first, he builds our house. And that's why we're going to spend 2021 building. So we've got 5 key vision goals because we love to have SMART goals here at Beyond Church. We like them to be measurable. And so here they are. Number 1. We're going to build relationships with new people in new communities by planting 1 new physical church location in the Hunter region in 2021. That's right, another new church plant. You may not be aware of this, but we've actually ended up planting 2 churches in 2020, against all the odds. In February, we began our first physical church plant with Beyond Church Scone. And then after our online-only season as a church, we saw the great opportunity for continued reach and impact through this online format. And so we created space for Beyond Church Online to become its own location. And it has continued in great strength since then. I'm going to speak to that more in a moment. So all the research shows, if you're into reading church leadership research, which I'm guessing most of you aren't, all the research shows that church planting is still the fastest and most effective way of reaching new people in new places with the same timeless, transformational news about Jesus. But this year, we know it from experience. So next year, we will plant 1 new physical church plant in the Hunter region. Second key vision goal is we will build capacity in our people and make room for our people to grow and lead at new levels, raising new life group leaders, team leaders, mentors, location leaders, and church planters. You know, we want to cast a vision so big that it draws and attracts big people to want to partner with it. And let me give you some stats. This year already we have seen 8 new life group leaders raised across our 3 locations, including our very first from our online location. Big shout out to Paul Ivy in the comments, who is our first ever Beyond Church online location life group leader. Well, boy, that's a long title. And I believe they met for the first time last week. Congratulations on your new role, Paul Ivy. You are a legend. We have also seen 10 new team leaders raised across our 3 locations. We've seen 29 people engaged in our 12-month leadership development mentoring program, including 4 of our Cessnock youth. We've seen 5 new location leaders raised and empowered to lead our 3 locations as we make room for more leaders to be raised to plant new churches. And we have seen 2 new churches planted in a year where churches globally were forced to not meet face-to-face for several months at a time. I mean, hands up, praise Jesus emoji. All the miracles have been happening this year at Beyond Church in 2020, and we're going to continue to build on that next year. Our third vision goal is we are going to build capacity in our organisation to lead other churches in the Hunter region as they require support or assistance in a post-COVID world. You know, we have got some world-class leaders who lead teams and locations and our executive here at Beyond Church. These are the kind of people who could lead corporations, who could lead large companies, who could lead nations, who could lead other large not-for-profit organisations, but yet they've chosen to partner their lives with the vision of the local church to make room for new people to continue saying yes to Jesus. So we know we've got a lot to offer, and we want to be organisationally prepared and ready to bring assistance when it's required in a post-COVID world. Key vision goal, I forgot what it's called then. Key vision goal 4 is we will build momentum for exponential growth beyond our usual goals as people begin to live their lives in less restricted ways again. And look, we know this is audacious. There probably aren't that many churches. Well, hopefully there are lots of churches seeing the opportunity for immense growth in 2021. People are lonely. People have been isolated. People are suffering with mental health conditions that they never knew existed before. People are suffering from unemployment, physical health challenges. And what better way to help them than to invite them to partner their lives with the mission and vision of the local church? You know, we've continued to see so many new people connect with our church across locations, even despite the challenges we've faced. Let me tell you about a couple of things. Our Scone location launched on February 2 this year and held only 8 face-to-face services before being forced to close the doors and meet online only. Really just getting started, really just getting to know people. And yet, in a year with only 23 weeks of face-to-face services so far, we have already seen 39 first-time guests connect with our Scone church and 6 people say yes to Jesus for the very first time. Our Cessnock location has, before yesterday, had 111 first-time guests. There were many more than that yesterday. And then 17 people, 2 more yesterday. So 19 people say yes to Jesus for the first time in services this year. And our online location here, this room, has actually only been running as its own unique location on Monday nights for 15 weeks and is reaching an average of 195 people per week, with one person saying yes to Jesus for the first time. When I say 195 people per week, that's based on unique devices, which we get the metrics for, and that's only during the online live event. There are hundreds more views of our services on both Facebook and YouTube after the live event has finished. We're reaching literally hundreds of people every week through this online format. Lastly, our 5th goal, we're going to build towards a new childcare centre in the Upper Hunter, which will increase our connection in that region and help us reach new families with the good news about Jesus. Have a listen to my favourite story from our whole Beyond Church world this year. We actually began Beyond Church Creative Academy in Scone last year before we ever held face-to-face services in that location. It's a big part of the why of how we reach new people in new communities. And our very first student who attended lessons at Beyond Church Scone was invited with a family to come to our launch service on February 2 this year and came along because, you know, Creative Academy gives us the opportunity to invite new families to partner with us for church services. They started coming along and then of course shut down, and they were online, and then they've come back to the room. That family are now going to become our first ever people from our Beyond Church Scone location to be water baptised. And if that isn't a story about the why of being strategic about using new methods and new models to bring church into a new community in new ways to reach new people, then I don't know what is. That's the why behind moving towards childcare in the Upper Hunter. So you may not see a physical childcare centre built to completion in the Upper Hunter this year or in 2021, but we will be laying a strong foundation toward that goal with our planning in 2021. Foundations. It reminds me of something Jesus says about building. In Matthew 7, he says, "Everyone who hears my teaching and applies it to his or her life can be compared to a wise man who built his house on an unshakable foundation. And when the rains fell and the flood came, with fierce winds beating down upon his house, it stood firm because of its strong foundation. Every time we gather at Beyond Church, online and in our physical church services, we make the invitation for people to begin the building journey, to begin to lay the firm foundation of a life with Jesus. And I'm going to make that invitation tonight like I do every time I'm here. If this message tonight has inspired you and compelled you that there's something bigger at force in your world, in your life, that Jesus wants to partner and befriend you to build you a stronger future for you, then what I would invite you to do is this. Say yes in the comments, and we're going to pray together. Everybody who's here in this room physically, everybody who's in their rooms, all our team members, we're all going to pray. You're going to copy after me just like we do in the physical room. We're going to mark this moment as laying a firm foundation of a life built on Jesus and his word for your future. So why don't you pray with me now? Jesus, this is my decision. Today I say yes to you. You died on the cross to pay the price for my sin. I invite you to be my Saviour. Come into my life, forgive my sin, and fill me with the power of your Holy Spirit. Amen.